Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I am your host. I am your beat reporter, and I have been your beat reporter covering the Jacksonville Jaguars on SI every single day since August 2019, and we are here to march forward through another offseason together. As always, you can find our 100% free 24/7 boots on the ground coverage of the Jacksonville Jaguars every single day on social media such as Facebook and Twitter at Jaguars on SI. You can also find us at www.si.com/NFL/Jaguars. All right, folks, welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about our observations of the first day of OTAs for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, obviously, it's OTAs. It's shorts, it's helmets. There's a context that always needs to be required for these kinds of practices. You don't need to look impressive in OTAs to have a good season. And just because you look impressive in OTAs doesn't mean you're going to have a good season. And obviously, while coaches, players, everybody wants everything to be, perfect on any given play, it's just not the reality of the NFL. So, I've seen lots of OTAs over, my time covering the Jaguars. Not often do I think it's really been reflective of, the team. With that said, you do get a bit of a sense more of the pieces that they're working with because you're no longer talking about it hypothetically or theoretically. You're getting to see more and more what the real intended usage looks like it's going to be, stuff like that. So, for me, to sum up the first day of Jaguars OTAs, it was clear that, it was a day of learning, I think, for the offense. Definitely a day of some struggles. And I don't think it was any one particular person or even two. A lot of people had struggles. There were a lot of drops. There were, from what I saw, 5 turnovers and also a quarterback, having the ball fall out of his hand on, one play in a team drill. You saw 2 interceptions from Trevor Lawrence. One that was an overthrow to Darnell Savage, got the other miscommunication between him and Parker Washington, got tipped, and Jarian Jones intercepted it. I thought Jarian had an impressive practice. He had a really good offseason, if you remember last year. He was like the standout defender of the offseason last year, of this time of the year. So we'll see, obviously how that carries over. Outside of the 2 Trevor picks, you had Nick Mullins throwing an interception. You had Jordan Walford throwing an interception. Seth Hennigan, the only one, not turned over. You also saw, Tune fumble on, one of the first reps in team drills that was recovered by Josh Hines-Allen, obviously. There's a clip going out there now of Liam Cohen, talking about it after practice. Again, it's OTAs. You don't want to fumble in any practice setting at all. And had that fumble happen at their next OTA practice instead of this one, like, this one is just no dancing around it because the media, myself and others, were there. Like, we saw it. We're going to write about it in our observations. But one of my main observations of the day wasn't Tune fumbled the ball. I just don't think it's as simple as that. I noted it because it happened, but just to me, this time in OTAs, obviously you don't want to fumble the ball in any practice setting, especially in these settings. It's not a positive. It's, nothing like that. But still, I don't think the end of the world or anything like that. I thought, for Trevor Lawrence, obviously his first day really in a competitive setting, throwing, this much since, the shoulder surgery. I think that, it looked like it. Trevor's always been a guy who, even on air, some days he's just doesn't miss. Some days, not so much. It was just one of those days. He still made some impressive throws, some really good ones to Brian Thomas Jr. And Travis Hunter, near the sidelines. He looked, great on the move. I thought, the interceptions he threw, one of them, he overthrew Travis Hunter. That was a miss. That was a bad interception. He had a couple other misses in the day. The Parker Washington one, I have no idea because I don't know the context of, who was right and who was wrong in that scenario. So I refuse, to really pass too much opinion on it. Obviously, it's still a turnover. It still counts the same as turnover for the whole offense. It's just hard for me to, really kind of assign blame. But in that same vein, I don't think it really means anything. I don't think, how a guy does in OTAs, especially, brand new scheme, etc., is really all that meaningful. And I thought Liam Cohen said a lot of really interesting and honest things, in his post-practice press conference. And I thought one thing that he said was, he was asked, is defense ahead of the offense this time of year, etc. And he said, yeah, and you expect it to be. And defense, that is one thing I can say. This is, 2019, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. This but about to be my seventh season covering the team. And I can say in pretty much every OTA and training camp, at least early on in training camp, I've seen defenses are ahead of the offense. It's the same way at every level of football, frankly. And especially so when you're installing a new scheme and things like that. So it didn't surprise me to see it be a little bit of a, struggle, and it didn't surprise me to see that the defense, had an impressive day. I thought several defenders, stood out. Ventrell Miller had a really, his interception was a really impressive one. I thought, overall, you can just see where the improvements are going to come in the secondary. Travis Hunter obviously practiced that wide receiver throughout the day. I thought he had, an impressive day, already improving. Very, very, explosive athlete. Just the way he moves is different. And, in general, his ball skills. And you can see how he's going to be a threat for them. And one thing that, sometimes makes describing, these kind of practices difficult is we can't, and I think it's a good rule and a necessary one, even if, it stinks for those who aren't really seeing it, is, you can't disclose some tactical information. So I'm not going to go into lineups or anything like that. Anything the team publishes, obviously, is fair game. But I'm not going to say who was with first team, second team, etc. But I can say, just looking at secondary and several other position groups, it's clear that competition is going to be high in order for this Jaguars team. There are not a lot of spots that it's very clear guys are locked in. Obviously, Brian Thomas Jr. is locked in. Obviously, Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen are locked in. Fourier is locked in. Trevor's locked in. Travis Hunter's locked in. Outside of that, and outside of some of their, clear free agency signings who are obviously going to start, I don't think there are many spots that are just simply already decided. I think the Jaguars are going to embrace competition, and you might even see some surprising decisions made in terms of where guys are playing and where they are in the pecking order. When a new regime comes in and they're able to look at it with a fresh set of eyes, sometimes that's the best thing about bringing in a new regime. They can access it, completely without bias. And doesn't always mean they're right. Doesn't always mean they're wrong. Sometimes bias is, to a point, brought into it and they bring in their own guys, etc. They're doing that because of an unbiased evaluation of the holdovers, etc. When that happens, you just see, a massive wave of change throughout the roster. And you've seen that this offseason. They signed a dozen free agents. They brought in, I believe it's 31 rookies. It's a much different 90-man roster than it was this time a year ago. Much different. I mean, some rooms, the offensive line room, the tight end room, the wide receiver room, the safety room, etc. They don't look anything, like they did this time a year ago. And I think that's important for the Jaguars to continue to carry throughout these offseason practices. And that, to me, was really the biggest takeaway, is that, there's going to be a lot of competition on this roster, for playing time, for starting spots, for whatever you want to call it. So ultimately, I thought it was an OTA practice. Again, I'm telling you from somebody who viewed it and who has viewed many, I don't put a lot of stock into it. Yeah, the offense and Trevor Lawrence didn't have their best day. I don't really think it matters. But still, I'm there to tell you what happened, what I saw. You can put as much stock, into it as you want. But that is what I saw during the first day of Jaguars OTAs. I'd be remiss, actually, if I didn't mention De'Ami Brown. Heck of a practice. I thought he looked very impressive. Very good hands, very good routes, made some explosive plays. Didn't make a lot of mistakes. And you saw a lot of mistakes, from individual guys. You didn't see many, if any, from him. So that is what I saw during the first day of Jacksonville Jaguars OTAs. Please don't forget, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all other podcast platforms at the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. You can also find all of our videos, including from today at OTAs, and our practice highlight clip at YouTube at Sports Videos on SI.